graduation is more than a finish line. It's actually a starting line. And yes, there are those finishes, but something new always comes when graduation happens. And I know many of us in the room aren't graduating high school over the next couple of weeks, and many of us may not be graduating college in the next couple of weeks. But what I know about life is that there are graduations all the time. Yeah, we see it with the high school and the college, but we see it when it comes from no spouse to spouse, or no career to career, or no kids to kids. We see graduations happen all the time, and what I've learned about life is that oftentimes we graduate from something comfortable to something a little unfamiliar. And maybe you've had those experiences. Anybody been in an unfamiliar season in their life before? I think we've all probably been in one of those places where we're just kind of used to everything normal, like going to school. We do that our whole lives, growing up, and so it's just comfortable. And then we get out of that, and then it's unfamiliar. And I know a lot of us have different things that we go through where we graduate from something familiar to something unfamiliar. And so what do we do with that? What do we do with that? I know sometimes in my life, when I've done that, when I've experienced those transition moments from graduation to something new, is oftentimes the trap that I fall into when I'm in an unfamiliar place is to look around and see what everybody else is doing. Maybe you've been there. And oftentimes we might ask some questions of like, man, what college are they going to? Or what career are they getting? And sometimes we get to this question in this rat race of life, trying to keep up with everybody, where we say, man, am I doing enough? And what I want our high school and college graduates to know today is that you aren't called to run someone else's race. You're called to run your race. And it's hard sometimes because we do look around. When we get into those unfamiliar places, we start to look around and wonder what everybody else is doing, what college they going to, what job they getting, what can I do in order to do what they're doing, right? We all get there. And what I want to warn us against today, and we're going to see this in Hebrews chapter 12, that we aren't supposed to do what everybody else is doing. God has created you for a purpose, for your race. And it's okay to be different. It's okay to look a little bit different. And whether you're graduating a school or not, we've all are stepping into something. 2 years ago, I started to run, and I did it to lose weight after we had our first kid. And I didn't realize what it would turn into. At that time, I only really ran a 5K. That was about the furthest that I'd ever ran. And then I was like, okay, let's see what happens here. And I ended up running like 5 or 6 miles, and I thought that was the peak. I was like, I'm done. I'm good there. And then I was like, well, I'm not done running, so I'll run a half marathon. So I ran a half. And then the next couple months later, ran another half. And then I was like, okay, the next thing that a half marathoner does is run a marathon, right? That's the next step. And so I was... It was last fall, and I just ran my half, and I knew I wanted to run a marathon sometime. I was actually thinking it would be next year. But then Maddie and I found out we're having another kid in the summer. And I just knew that if I waited to train after we have another kid, it probably wasn't going to be that easy. And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to commit to it and do it. And so April 6th, went to Knoxville, ran a marathon, and was able to complete that, which was something that I was really excited about. But I tell you that because it wasn't the most picture-perfect thing ever. It wasn't easy. And obviously, that's a dumb statement. Of course, the marathon is not easy. But I tell you that because I didn't hit my goal time. My goal time in the marathon, and I trained for this and all this, was 4 hours, but somewhere big range, 4 hours to 4 hours and 30 minutes. And so I kind of gave myself a buffer there, and I was thinking, that's what I'm going to run in. And then the week leading up to that, I was sick. It was pouring rain that day. They almost canceled the race. And so that was frustrating. And then around mile 8, I had some gut issues. And I'll just leave it there. I hadn't had that experience in a race before. And when you have to stop, it adds time to your run. Around mile 15, I started to get cramps in my quads. Never experienced this while running. And they lasted for the last 11 miles. Not fun. And I remember in the middle of it saying, I'm never running again. It's never going to happen. But then I've got a couple hours past and said, okay, I'll do it again. But I'll tell you this, I didn't hit my goal time. In fact, it was like closer to 5 hours. And I was frustrated in the middle of it. I'd never ran this much before. I only ran 20 miles in training. That's kind of what they tell you to do. And so I was in the middle of it. It was difficult. But I caught myself multiple times as I started to feel my pace slow down, looking at other runners passing me and saying, man, they're going to get my time. And I was frustrated. I was actually upset with myself. I was mad at myself that I wasn't going to be able to do what everybody else was doing. And I was mad. And then there was a moment where, I don't know what mile it is. I don't remember. It was all kind of a blur for a little bit. But I remember thinking in my head, Matt, it doesn't matter what pace you have. You just have to finish the race. And that's kind of the mantra that I took on. I was running a lot slower than I usually do, and I was like, whatever, I'm just going to get to that finish line. I'm going to get there. And sometimes in life, we have those same experiences where we get into unfamiliar territory, things that we've never done before, and things start to hit us, and things start to take us out, or things try to take us out, and we have a choice. It's either to finish the race, or we can fall into a comparison trap. And we can say, oh man, those people are doing that. Those people are getting my time. I need to try to speed up. But if I would have sped up and tried to run a pace of somebody that ran 3 hours, I would have not have made it. I would have died. Another thing is, yeah, we can compare ourselves to people who are ahead of us, but we can also compare ourselves to people who are behind us, can't we? And say, oh, we're better than they are. It goes both ways. But what I want to remind you of today is that we have to understand that God didn't call us to run someone else's race. He called you to run your race at the pace that He has set out for you. Because what happens sometimes is when we graduate high school, we graduate college, and maybe you were like me when it comes to graduating and trying to figure out your own life. We all had a plan for our own life, right? And as you get older, you realize that God laughs at that sometimes. But I had plans for when I was 22. When I'm 22, I'm going to be here. When I'm 25, I'm going to be here. When I'm 27, I'm going to be here. And now that I look past 27, 30, 35, 40. And as I've gotten to this point, I've realized that my plan doesn't line up with God's. And the reality is that's okay. It's actually better that way. But in the midst of that, we have to learn a lot of things through it. But we all have those plans, but we have to remind ourselves that God has a different plan. God has a different pace for you, and that's okay. And as we look into Hebrews chapter 12, I want to remind you, God's not asking you to run someone else's. God has called you to run the one He marked out just for you. It's special. And if you look at Hebrews chapter 12, there's that word therefore in the first verse, which indicates that there's a reason it's there for. And so if you look back to Hebrews chapter 11, you will see what we crown the chapter of the Bible as heroes of the faith. It's listing all these people who were faithful in their lifestyle. And then it says, therefore, now do this. Remember these things. And so we don't have time to go through all of Hebrews chapter 11, but I just want to indicate and highlight a couple of people that we see in that chapter. We see Noah. We know that Noah built an ark before it ever even rained. And people laughed at him. It would have been easy while people were laughing to say, I'm just going to go do what other people are doing. I'm not going to run my own race. But he obeyed. We see Abraham, who left everything familiar to him to follow God into the unknown. We see Sarah, who believed God for the impossible in her own age, and God ended up giving it to her. We see Moses, who was old and who probably had a speech impediment and who had killed a man, was called to lead God's people out of slavery. We see Rahab, who was a former prostitute, who trusted God and ended up saving her family with her obedience. We see Samson, a man with a messy life, but even in failure, ended up turning back to God and finishing his race. We see David, a shepherd, a warrior, a king, not a perfect man by all means, but a man after God's own heart, who ran towards giants when others ran away. We see these individuals in Scripture, and it reminds us, you know what? They didn't have perfect resumes, They weren't perfect people, but they ran their own race. Wouldn't it have been silly if David said, I'm going to build an ark? Right? That would have been silly. That had already been done. God didn't need an ark when David was there. Wouldn't it have been crazy if Moses said, hey, I'm going to do what Abraham did? God had a story. God had a plan, a race for every single person in Hebrews chapter 11 that we read about, and we celebrate those people all the time. And I just wonder, is there going to be a point in maybe post our life where people will look at our life and say, man, they were a hero because they were faithful in their race. They didn't try to do what everybody else was doing. No, they were good with their race and they were fine with it. And so we get to Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. It says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, all of these good examples of the faith, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles us. When we're living in sin, when we're living apart from God, we are tied up. We can't do what God's called us to do there. He says, throw all of that off. And I picture this idea of someone running with a 100-pound weight on their back. It's not as easy to run when you got a 100-pound weight on your back. He's saying, throw that off because it's freeing. When you step into a life with Jesus, it's freeing. We go away from who we used to be and we step into something brand new. So throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles us. And let us run with perseverance. Other translations will use this word perseverance as endurance. Let us run with endurance the race marked out for us. Not someone else's, but yours. Number 2, verse 2, it says, fixing your eyes on Jesus, the pioneer, the one that's guiding your life, and the perfecter, the one that's making you new into a new creation, the perfecter of your faith. Fix your eyes on him, not on everybody else. It says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, talking about Jesus, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. What a great reminder for us today. What a great reminder for us. Because we see that Jesus faced opposition from sinners. The Bible tells us this, and so we can expect it too in our lives. But the good news is because he showed us how to get through it. He's experienced it himself. He says, whenever you face opposition, whenever people are talking, whenever you're trying to live up to other people's expectations, you're going to care about what they think. But if you stay on God's plan, nothing's going to stop you from it. You have a purpose and you have a reason for it. So don't lose heart. Don't grow weary. The phrase, the race set before us, means that God has a unique path for you. He has a unique assignment for every single person in the room, whether you're graduating from high school or college this week or in the next couple of weeks, or whether you're not. God has a plan for you, but it's different than someone else's. The Greek word for race, agon, is the root of agony. It implies challenge and hardship. And we are going to experience those things in life, but it also means purpose. And a lot of times we find our purpose in the pain. And that's okay. You know, here's what we need to know, that we don't need to compare our race to everyone else's, because here's what I know about graduating high school is that's what I did. Maybe you're the same. Say, man, I didn't go do that degree. I didn't make that kind of money graduating college. And maybe some people say, oh, well, that person's married and I'm not. And I'm older than them, or they have kids and I'm not. And we get so caught up in this comparison trap. We don't need to compare our race to someone else's. We don't need to get distracted by the scoreboard that everybody seems to keep. We need to know that some of us will go faster than others. Some of us will face detours in our life. But God says that we need to stay on track. And I don't know what that track is for you, but God is guiding you to it. God didn't make you to be somebody else. He made you to be faithful. And so here's what we need to remember from Hebrews chapter 12. We need to remember these three things. We've already talked about them a little bit here, but we need to run light. We need to drop what's holding you back, because you can't fully, passionately pursue Jesus unless you take off the things that are holding you from him, unless you give those things to him. So run light. Take that 100-pound weight off your back and run as fast as you can to Jesus. The second thing is this: keep your eyes on Jesus. Peter, when he got out of the boat, kept his eyes on Jesus, and he was good. He was able to walk on the water, and he started to sink because he got distracted by the other forces, by the other things around him, and it happens to us, y'all. We get distracted. The good news is when we sink, because we get distracted, Jesus is there to pick us up. But we just need to remind ourselves that we have to keep our eyes on Jesus. I had an old Sunday school teacher that said, kind of gave this word picture of, think about following Jesus as a straight line between you and him. You're following after him. You're following after him. And I'll exaggerate my hand motion here just so you all can see it. But even if you go off that straight path by a little bit of a degree, say 1/10 of a degree, for a little bit, it's going to look like you're still following Jesus, right? It's going to be easy. It's going to be good. But as you get further and further away, it's going to start to go this way. That's why it's so important to keep your eyes on Jesus. Focus on him. Because if we're not careful, we can get further and further away. Good news is he does allow us to come back. But let's not go there. Let's stay here. Keep your eyes on Jesus. And the third thing is, don't quit. Remember who you're running with. Because there will be moments in your life as you are stepping into your calling and you're doing what you're called to do, that you'll face hardship, you'll face issues, but don't quit. Jesus experienced hardship, and the good news is he's teaching us how to get through it too. And he's running with us. You'll face setbacks, you'll have doubt, you'll wonder if you're falling behind of everybody else, but know that Jesus doesn't quit on you. He's not done with you. Don't grow weary, don't give up, don't check out. You need to keep running towards him. And so I show you those three things. I'm going to give you a bonus one. I'm going to put this on the screen. Maybe this is something you want to write down. Here's what we need to remind ourselves of. And here's what I'm going to leave you with today. We see in Hebrews chapter 12, we need to run your race. It's easy. It's easy when we're running in the race of life to see someone else a little more successful than us and wish that was us. But God has a different definition of success. His definition of success is faithful obedience, a long obedience in the same direction towards him. And so run your race. People will try to get you to run someone else's. They'll try to get you to run theirs, but stay on your race. Drop what holds you back. Take that weight off your back and run after him. Fix your eyes on Jesus. That's what you're called to. Don't care what anybody else has to say. Don't care about the opposition that you face. Stay on course with Jesus. Why? Because you have a purpose. And nobody can take you off that purpose except for you. Don't allow it to happen. Don't allow it to happen. And finally, we see this because it goes back to Hebrews chapter 11 and looks back that way. We need to learn from the faithful people before us. And whenever you're on that path, look at the people in your life that have been faithful and learn from them. Just like the author of Hebrews in chapter 12 says, hey, remember those people in chapter 11 we talked about, the heroes? Look like them. Run your own race. Don't do what they did, but be faithful like them. And man, I've had a great example of this in my own life over the last couple of years, and really prevalent right now in my mind, but I think about a hero of the faith for me in Dick Morris. I mean, what a man. Dick Morris was one of one. If you knew Dick, you knew he was unique. He was a different character. But that's what made him him. Dick Morris didn't care about what anybody had to say about him. He didn't care about the opposition that he faced. He just cared about doing his purpose and his will, God's will. And he walked his own path. And yesterday we had a celebration of life service here. And man, just hearing the stories of of so many people talking about how faithful he was. That's a testament. That's a story that I think we all should tell. That we should all want to be told about our lives, that we were faithful, that we ran our own race, not caring about what everybody else had to say. I read this verse yesterday at his Celebration of Life service. Paul writes in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. And so run your race so that one day you can say that. One day you're going to cross that final finish line of life. And you'll hear that voice that Dick Morris heard about 2 weeks ago that said, well done, good and faithful servant. But we have to remind ourselves, not someone else's. Don't fall into that trap. Run yours. And when you run yours and you have your eyes on Jesus, nothing and no one can knock you off of it. Run your race.